They say the wind in Arroyo Valley speaks, if you listen long enough, whispers caught between the reeds, gathering above the mossy stones. The kind of sound that makes your spine hush, makes even birds pause their wings mid-flight. Nobody knows when it started, just that it never quite stopped. Some call it foolishness, valley lore, old tales spun from boredom and fog. But others remember. They say that long ago, before the highway cut through the foothills, before the grocery store had fluorescent lights, a boy arrived in Arroyo Valley and brought silence with him. Not the peaceful kind of silence, no. This one was heavy. The kind that fills rooms, presses on the chest, lingers behind closed doors. No one knew quite what had happened. No one wanted to pry. He came to live with the old couple in the farmhouse, with the rusted weather vane where goats wandered too far and chickens laid eggs in the boots on the porch. The boy did not smile. He did not cry. He did not speak. But he listened, always listening, and it was in the week after the fire-orange maple leaves began to fall and before the first frost slicked the morning grass that something changed. Something. Tall dot, something fluffy, something that no one in the valley had really expected. A creature too quiet for livestock, too shaggy for polite company, and far too solemn to belong in any story that begins with once upon a time. Some say it just appeared at the edge of the woods. Others say it was delivered by a man with eyes the color of old, newspaper and boots that never made a sound. Whatever the truth, here is what the valley children still say as, later, in hushed voices. When the mist creeps low, there was a boy who wouldn't speak, and a llama who never needed words. And if you find yourself awake on a still night, with nothing but the wind rustling against your window and a heaviness in your chest you can't quite name-step outside, just for a moment, listen, you might hear it, to dot the echo of hooves in duet grass, a breath beside you in the dark, and the sound of something ancient and gentle, waiting to be remembered. Milo came to Arroyo Valley like wind slipping under a door, quiet, unseen, careful. He was 6 years old the day he arrived, tucked into the back seat of a sky-blue sedan that coughed more than it purred. The road in was long and full of turns, each one bending around golden hills and sleepy trees that whispered to no one in particular. He didn't ask where they were going. He hadn't asked in a long time. His hands stayed clasped in his lap, fingers woven tight like they knew something they couldn't say aloud. His eyes, large and brown like earth after rain, watched fields pass by with no more expression than a stone. The car came to a stop beside a white farmhouse with chipping paint and a porch that leaned to the left, as though tired from a long life of holding stories. Chickens scratched in lazy circles by the steps. A goat bleated once and ignored everything else. "Here we are," said the woman in the front seat, her voice kind but worn at the edges. She was his grandmother. Her silver hair was pulled back with a rubber band that didn't quite match, and her glasses slid down the bridge of her nose. Milo didn't respond. His grandfather stood at the door, wiping his hands on a cloth that looked older than anything Milo owned. He gave a small nod as the boy stepped from the car, then reached for the suitcase with stickers peeling off one side. They didn't say much as he was shown inside. A bedroom with soft yellow curtains, a quilt that smelled faintly like eucalyptus, and time, a shelf with dusty picture books, untouched. Dinner was chicken stew and cornbread. Milo sat at the table, eating in tiny bites. He made no mess. He made no sound. His grandparents spoke in low, gentle voices about the weather, the hens, whether the pumpkins this year would be round or strange, like last October. Milo stared at his spoon and listened, always listening in the days that followed. He explored the yard in slow, careful circles. He never wandered far. He liked drawing in the dirt with a stick, long loops and spirals and tiny stars that only meant something to him. Sometimes he would lie back in the tall grass, arms crossed beneath his head, watching the clouds push across the hills. He didn't scream, he didn't laugh, he didn't speak. Once his grandmother tried humming a lullaby while folding laundry. Milo tilted his head faintly, as if the sound brushed against a locked window somewhere deep inside. But he said nothing. Another time, his grandfather built him a kite. Bright red, sturdy frame. They walked to the field behind the barn. The wind picked up, tugged gently. The kite danced. Milo held the string loosely, watching it climb. But when asked if he liked it, he only nodded. Quietly, once. There had been therapists, soft-spoken women with clipboards and stickers, a man with puzzles and picture cards. But no matter how friendly their voices, how warm their smiles, Milo would not answer. "He'll come around," his grandmother said. She always said that at night, when the dishes were done and the curtains were drawn and an ache filled the spaces nothing else could reach, children know how to grow, even after storms. His grandfather wasn't sure. He'd seen a drought, split the earth beyond repair. Then came a conversation over breakfast, quiet and strange. A neighbor, old Gus, who raised alpacas, had stopped by with a story about a nearby rancher ready to sell off his land and animals. He's keeping the sheep, but says he's too tired for the old fellow. Llama, I think. Big one, not much use anymore. Friendly though, the grandmother blinked over her tea. A llama doesn't spit, just stands around, watchful. You know, like he's waiting for something. They didn't talk about it again until that night, sitting on the porch swing, September settling around them like soft wool. Her voice found the idea again. What if we took him in? The llama, the grandfather, chuckled. "We're not short on animals, dear." "No, but maybe," she trailed off, looking toward the window where Milo sat curled up with a blanket, tracing circles on the fogged glass. "Well." The old man rubbed his chin. "Couldn't hurt." And so, a call was made. Arrangements settled. No big announcements, just a decision, planted like a seed. A week later, Milo stood barefoot on the porch as the sun rose low behind a wall of trees. A truck pulled into the gravel drive, trailing dust and the smell of dry hay. The man who stepped out wore a weathered hat pulled low, and boots with scuffs trailing up their sides like maps of long-forgotten paths. He didn't say much. I nodded once and opened the rear gate. That's when Milo saw him. Lorenzo, tall, shaggy, ears tilted like question marks. His coat was the color of worn parchment, and his expression unreadable. The boy and the llama simply stared at one another, neither blinking. Not a word passed between them. Lorenzo stepped gently to the ground, hooves pressing soft divots into the dirt. He looked left, then right, then stopped and faced the boy. The man gave a nod, retired. "Guardian," he muttered, as if that explained everything. Then, without another word, he climbed back into his truck. The engine groaned, tires crunching gravel, until all that remained was a faint dusting of quiet in the air. Grandmother watched from the kitchen door. Grandfather stood nearby, arms folded, curious. But Milo didn't move, and neither did Lorenzo. The wind tumbling from the hills flitted past them both, and something slow began to shift. Not in steps, Not in stillness, but in stillness. And in stillness, sometimes, is where first friendships begin. Lorenzo's arrival echoed in the farmhouse like a question left hanging in the air. The gravel driveway still bore the shape of heavy tires, and the scent of hay lingered like an unfinished sentence. Milo hadn't spoken, not during the Llama's quiet descent from the truck, not as the stranger drove away, not even when the grandfather muttered, "Well, he's taller than I expected." The new presence on the farm moved like a dandelion clock floating just above the earth, deliberate, with a grace that didn't quite match his shaggy and peculiar frame. His neck bent gently, his soft eyes scanning the yard as though looking for something old and nearly forgotten. Milo stood motionless on the edge of the porch, his toes curled slightly over the wooden trim, body still as driftwood in a pond. Lorenzo gave him a glance, not long, not sharp, just enough. Then, without ceremony, the llama lowered himself into the grass beside the porch and folded his long legs. One by one, like a creature made of warm clouds and secrets. He didn't make a sound. For a moment, Milo wanted to step back into the house, but he didn't. Instead, he sat down, too silent, a few feet away, legs swinging over the step, and together they waited. For what, neither seemed to know. That afternoon, Lorenzo didn't explore the property. He didn't sniff at the goat pen, or challenge the chickens, or nibble at the flowers. He simply rested in the shade, watching trees rustle in the breeze and dust swirl like lazy fireflies. Milo stayed close. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He didn't run inside as the sun dipped low. When his grandmother called him in for supper, he turned slowly, gave the llama one last look, and whispered something only the wind could hear. Each day after that began the same. Milo would slip out the door, early and soft as the morning birds, and find Lorenzo exactly where he had left him, beside the porch or near the fence line, or crouched under the lone alder tree that creaked when the weather changed. Sometimes Milo brought him things: a smooth pebble shaped like a teardrop, a twig with 3 branches like a trident, a small corn husk doll. He never offered them directly, just set them gently on the ground nearby and sat back down. Lorenzo never refused, never moved them, but he stayed close, close enough for the boy to trust. One afternoon, with clouds piling like cotton over the hills, Milo brought his stick and began to draw in the dirt. Spirals, loops, a crooked sun, then a line that arched smoothly, then broke. He drew in silence, while Lorenzo watched with half-closed eyes, blinking only when the wind made the dust dance. At some point, Milo's lines began leading toward the llama. Curved trenches in the earth, careful and deliberate, like a path being built. Though neither of them moved to follow it, he reached the front hooves and stopped. The next day, the boy built small stacks of pebbles, one atop the other in messy towers that wobbled but held. Lorenzo gazed down, seemingly puzzled, or simply respectful. The days meandered forward. After a week, Milo changed rhythm. He no longer sat far away. Now he settled himself beside the llama's side, small shoulder, brushing against soft wool, the warm scent of earth and sun-bleached coat surrounding him like a blanket. Nothing was said, but things were happening. It was the grandmother who first noticed the change. From behind her kitchen window where the glass fogged and shimmered, depending on the time of days, she saw Milo rocking slightly beside the llama one afternoon, his body swaying gently as his lips moved, but no words escaped. She pressed her palm to the cool pane and leaned closer. He wasn't speaking, he was humming, faint, airy notes. wobbly and half-formed like lullabies learned before language, like raindrops tapping on tin, as if a song long buried beneath his ribs had finally stirred. Lorenzo tilted his head, just slightly. Just enough, the boy kept humming. Every day after that, the tune grew clearer, notes like puzzle pieces gathering courage. Sometimes Lorenzo would grunt short, soft sounds buried almost within the wind, and Milo would pause, then adjust. They were learning how to speak. The grandfather buried bean seeds in the spring ground and whispered to his wife that evening, "The boy's got a song in him again." She simply exhaled through her smile and said nothing. By the second week, Milo brought a scarf outside, one his mother had knitted long ago. He now used like a talisman, old wool and fading blue, soft as breath. During a grey afternoon shower, he found Lorenzo huddled beneath the alder tree, tufts of his fur damp and matted. Milo didn't hesitate. He approached without fear, draped the scarf around the llama's long neck awkwardly, gently, and then pressed his forehead against Lorenzo's side. No words, just breathing, just warmth. The rain came harder, but neither moved. Inside the kitchen, soup simmered. The storm passed. By morning they were still there. The scarf a little damp, the earth a little softer, but the bond unmistakable now, a connection that had no need for language. Milo stopped using the stick to draw for a while, not because he didn't want tube, because the earth around Lorenzo had already been shaped into quiet little stories, circles that marked where stones had been, lines leading toward buried acorns, patterns so winding and strange they looked like music written for wind instead of ears. Instead, he began stacking dot. At first it was one rock balanced on another, then two, three. A small tower beside Lorenzo's front hoof, leaning just slightly to the left, as if the stones were curious about what they were becoming. Lorenzo didn't move, didn't flinch, just breathed long, slow breaths that puffed dust off the surface of the world. Some towers wobbled and fell. Milo rebuilt them. Others held, and he'd nod softly as if the stones had decided something important. The sun warmed the soil in golden sheets, and Milo would crouch for hours, the dust and grit gathering at his knees, balancing the pieces with fingertips steady from silence. One day, while the world around them buzzed with spring, Milo let a hum escape again. Not because he meant to more, like it drifted out of him, gentle and uninvited, like wind slipping through a keyhole. Lorenzo turned his head slightly, curiously, so Milo hummed again. A few shaky notes, something that couldn't be called a tune yet but still made the ivy shiver on the porch rail. A hum without a real beginning or ending, living only in that fleeting moment between breath and sound. Across the yard, the grandmother glanced out the window and stopped drying the plate. In her hand, wet cloths still draped over blue porcelain. Her heart caught somewhere between wonder and ache. She didn't call anyone, didn't speak, just smiled as the boy's humming grew steadier, rising like something remembered at first. Lorenzo only moved a little, ears, shifting head, tilting just off center. But soon, when the hums came smooth and slow, he made a noise of his own. Not words, not even close. Just a low sound, like two tree branches sighing against each other. A llama's groan, ancient, gentle, true. Milo smiled, not with his mouth but in the way his shoulders softened, in the breath that drifted from him like he'd been holding it since forever. Another day windier, wine Milo showed up dragging a blanket behind him. Not heavy, but patterned with stars. He laid it beside Lorenzo under the alder tree, sat cross-legged, hummed with his eyes closed. Lorenzo blinked slowly and shifted in closer until their sides just touched boy and beast. One warm, steady shape, drawing its own rhythm against the breath of the valley. Sometimes they sat with nothing between them at all, just presence, just quiet, and sometimes Milo spoke. Not words, not yet, but sounds shaped like things. A sigh that ended like a whisper that teased at memories. The vowel of a name he hadn't said in ages. Short, startling, brief. Lorenzo would grunt low and press closer, as if catching the broken syllables and tucking them somewhere safe. One overcast morning, while clouds hung low like sleeping giants, Milo picked up a piece of old fence wire that had twisted itself between some stones. He bent it not forcefully, just curious hands folding old shape into something new. He twisted it into a loop, then into a heart, then a shape that looked vaguely like a question mark and a star collided. He held it up between them. Lorenzo flared. His nose breathed the boy's scent deep. Without thinking, Milo whispered, "Keep." One word, barely louder than the breeze, but it lingered. Lorenzo blinked and leaned in until his nose nearly touched the wire. The boy placed it gently at his feet and turned back to stacking rocks. Later that evening, while folding linens, the grandfather cleared his throat and said, "Not looking up, he's figuring it out." The grandmother looked toward the window, but didn't answer. Some knowing didn't need filling. When nightfall wrapped its slow arms around the hills, Milo stood barefoot in the yard. The stars came shivering out one by one, and the moon hung like a bowl tipped slightly too far. Lorenzo lay curled near the porch again, the dark clanging gently to his wool-like stories not yet told. Milo whispered words like pieces of puzzle, still looking for a fit, come tomorrow. Lorenzo lifted his head, gave a soft, groaning grunt. Milo nodded. He didn't smile, not quite, but his lips curved like maybe he would soon. The Arroyo Valley Festival came every October, stitched together from hay bales, apple cider, and the kind of small-town joy that made even the sky seem friendlier. Booths lined the green near the post office, painted signs offering jars of pickled beets, pumpkin carving contests, and sacks of kettle corn that left sugar in your palms. Milo had never been. Not truly. His grandparents took turns going in the past years, always staying behind with the boy. It wasn't the kind of place where silence fit easily. Laughter echoed too loudly. Music moved too fast. But this year, something felt different. The week of the festival arrived, warm and crisp all at once, and Milo rose early each morning. He combed Lorenzo's coat with the edge of an old brush, humming under his breath. Not quite a melody, not quite silence, something in between. His grandmother squinted one morning over her teacup. "I think he wants to go." The grandfather set down his fork. "A llama," he said slowly, "at a festival." She smiled. Milo won't go without him, and so, on Saturday morning, beneath a sky so blue it looked freshly laundered, they dressed Lorenzo in a wide red ribbon and brushed the straw from his mane. Milo wore a pumpkin-colored sweater and shoes he wasn't used to wearing. They loaded into the old truck, Milo riding in the back with Lorenzo, both of them watching the trees pass. The festival greeted them with scents: cinnamon, roasted nuts, popcorn, soil. Children squealed through aisles of painted faces. Music spilled from a corner stage where fiddles danced over banjos, and the balloons bobbed like glimmering suns. Milo stepped carefully. He held tightly to the lead rope around Lorenzo's neck, though the llama hardly needed guiding. People turned, some pointed. A girl dropped her caramel apple, but the llama didn't react, not to the noise, not to the sudden hands reaching to pet him, or the camera flashes buzzing like flies. He kept pace with Milo, eyes forward, calm as always. When other children approached, Milo stepped back slightly. A boy asked, "Does he bite?" And Milo didn't answer, just shook his head slowly. The llama dipped his head, sniffed a wind chime stand, then stood still once more. They made it halfway through the market line, when the first thunder rolled, low, unexpected, not yet rain, but the kind of sound that shifted air and made tents flap like unsettled wings. Parents glanced upward. Vendors began tying down canopies. The music paused. Then came the second thunderer, sharper sound, cracking like a branch splitting open the sky. The clouds swarmed so suddenly, it felt like an interruption, and in the hazy rush that followed, a breeze knocked over baskets of pears. Children cried. Adults pulled jackets over shoulders. A new kind of noise took over. Umbrellas snapping open, hurried footsteps, instructions half shouted and blown away. Milo lost his grip on the rope. Just for a moment, Lorenzo was jostled by a running man carrying a crate of pies. The boy reached for him, heart lurching, and then the wind pushed. Milo stumbled sideways, a swirl of leaves and papers disguising the path between him and Lorenzo. The crowd closed briefly like a door. When it opened again, the boy was gone. Not far, just enough. Lorenzo stood frozen for a heartbeat, then took off. Not wildly, not the gallop of panic, but with focus, with each step placed like it belonged to knowing. He turned between booths, past the cider barrels, around the collapsed bounce house, until he caught the scent of damp wool and something else, grief, maybe, quiet panic, down by the edge of the riverbank where the festival lanterns couldn't reach. Milo sat near a hollow log, curled inward. Soft rain had started, not enough to soap, but enough to blur everything. He wasn't crying. Not until he saw Lorenzo. Then, from deep inside, somewhere rusted shut, the word tore out, wild and sharp. Lorenzo. A sound shaken by fear, small, brave, whole. The llama slowed to a stop beside him. Sat Milo, flung his arms around his neck, pressing his cheek against damp wool. All else paused. The rain, the river, the wind, all of it stilled. He whispered again. This time, no panic. Lorenzo, the second time, was softer. The grandfather found them, like that boy and llama, curled together beneath a maple. No one else around. Just the hush after a storm tries and fails to stay. He didn't say anything, just pulled off his coat and gently wrapped it around the child. The walk back to the truck was slow at the door to the farmhouse. Milo paused and turned to his grandparents. He raised one hand, touched his chest, then pointed toward Lorenzo. "Friend," he said. A simple word, but it echoed like a cathedral bell, and inside, something splintered in the best way. That night, Lorenzo lay curled by the porch bench as Milo read softly from an old picture book, tracing the words with one finger and letting the sounds rise like lanterns into the new quiet. Not the heavy silence of before, but one filled with room, one that now had space for laughter, and music, and words, and hooves waiting just outside the door. Milo didn't say much after the festival. He didn't have to. The word was out, now spoken once, then again, then in pieces that drifted toward full sentences on their own time. Questions, mostly, simple things. Why does the wind make the trees dance? What do goats eat when they're sad? Can clouds get lonely? He asked them aloud, his voice barely more solid than the breath behind it. And he'd asked them to Lorenzo. It didn't matter that Lorenzo never answered in words. His answers came in the soft twitch of ears, the way he shifted just close enough for the child to lean. And in his silence, that special kind that didn't feel empty at all. School was still months away. No rush. The adults didn't push. Time had its own pulse here, and it beat softly in the hollow of the valley. Wrapped in moss and distant bird calls, teachers came now and then, kind librarian, who brought storybooks, and a man who once worked with speechless children in faraway cities. They didn't make noise or ask for things. They just sat sometimes with Milo near the porch and read in slow, gentle voices. Milo always listened, but he read on his own, too. To Lorenzo, sometimes under the alder tree. Other times curled up on a patchwork quilt where the chicken fence gave shade. His voice hiccuped now and then, tripping softly over S's and L's, but it never stopped. And Lorenzo always listened. One afternoon, Milo drew a map. No one saw him do it, not until later. He used an old grocery bag he found in the drawer, and smooth charcoal from the fire pit edge. He didn't explain the lines, the dots, the loops around the corners. He simply laid it out on the ground beside his llama and began to hum again, low and steady. Lorenzo rested one great hoof beside the corner of the map. That was enough. Word spread slowly across Arroyo Valley about the boy and his llama. Stories moved littler than gossip, more like poems passed in folded notes. They walk at the same pace now, said one teacher in town. He reads to him like he's royalty. Someone whispered in the post office line. Even the children began to come slowly, carefully. A boy with downturned eyes left a pinnacone near Lorenzo's pen and ran away, grinning. A girl with a sunflower dress pressed a note into Milo's hand. It read, "I don't like big noise either, but I like you." The grandmother saved that one between the pages of her recipe book. Sometimes, after supper, she and Milo sat on the porch steps and peeled apples for pie. He'd hum while she worked, no words needed. And the grandfather, he started whispering stories again, old ones about traveling fairs and fog-thick oceans and animals that waited their whole lives for the right child to find them. Llamas are smart. You know, he said once while watching from the barn door. Guard animals, but gentle. They wait. They know who needs guarding. Milo didn't answer, only reached up to stroke Lorenzo's shaggy jaw, as if to say, I know. At night, Milo started sharing things. Not out loud, not always. Sometimes. He scribbled on note cards and tucked them into a tin box by Lorenzo's water trough. I used to dream of a swing that hung from a star. My mum smelled like mint and smoke. Sometimes I still get scared of shadows, even small ones. The note cards weren't secrets, not really, just truths not ready for the grown-ups yet. Lorenzo stood by every single one, his eyes deep and still and knowing. On Sundays, when the grandfather sat with his pipe and stared at the horizon like it owed him answers, the boy would crawl into the old rocker beside him and say soft things, like, I think the wind's teaching me its alphabet, and the grandfather would nod. Sometimes that was more than enough. One evening, mussy with the pink and orange hum of sunset, the grandmother paused, mid-knitting, and said to no one in particular, it's not speech what healed him, it's being heard. The goats rustled. The wind coughed once, then went still. Later that night, Milo curled beside Lorenzo beneath the stars, blanket tucked beneath his chin. He whispered, "You're my favorite part of the world." Lorenzo leaned just slightly, pressing his warmth against the child's side. A language of quiet, a bond made of bone-deep listening. On the morning of his first day back to school, Milo was awake before the rooster crowed. The sun was still stretching behind the pines, golden and soft like a secret. He dressed slowly, new pants that felt too stiff, a backpack that still smelled like the plastic wrap it came in, and shoelaces tied with shaky, deliberate fingers. In the kitchen, his grandmother poured warm milk into a mug covered in painted ducks. She didn't ask anything, didn't rush. That the old man sat on the porch with a thermos and the newspaper from 3 days ago unread. Milo opened the door quietly and stepped out. The chill in the air pressed lightly against his cheeks like a whisper saying, "You can do this." Lorenzo was already there, standing by the fence, waiting. Milo walked to him and leaned close, nose buried in the soft warmth of fur that smelled like dust and grass and calm. He didn't say anything right away, just stood still until the birds began to move in the trees. Then he said, "I'm scared." Lorenzo made a soft noise, less a sound, more a present sound, leaned his long head over Milo's shoulder. A woolen hug, steady, certain. Milo reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded paper. It was a picture he'd drawn the night before. Him on the swing behind the barn, Lorenzo beside it, stars overhead. He tucked it into the llama's halter strap. "So you won't forget me," he whispered, "even when I'm gone for a while." The bus pulled into the gravel clearing, making more noise than a vehicle should so early in the morning. Milo didn't flinch this time. He turned to his grandparents and nodded once, then turned back to Lorenzo and said, "I'll tell you everything when I get home." He stepped up onto the bus. The driver smiled and asked his name. He answered it clearly, sat near the window, pressed his hand against the glass as the farm rolled past. When the bus turned the bend, Lorenzo was still there, standing at the fence, picture still tucked by his cheek, watching at school. Milo was quieter than the other children, but not silent. He answered when the teacher asked his name. He raised his hand during story time. During art, he drew a field and a tree and a fuzzy creature with wide eyes and 2 long ears. At lunch, he sat alone until a girl with a yellow lunchbox scooted closer and offered him a grape. He took it, said thank you, and told her about the llama waiting at home that afternoon during show and tell. He stood in front of the class. "This is Lorenzo," he said, holding up the picture. "He's my best friend." He spoke the whole sentence without stopping, and something in the classroom air changed. After dismissal, he ran toward the bus with more speed than he'd thought he had. The ride home felt like hours stitched together by clock hands that forgot how to move. When they turned up the familiar road, past the mailbox leaning like a tired old man and the tree with the crooked limb, he saw the spot where Lorenzo always waited. Empty. His heart dropped before he could stop it. The bus hissed and knelt. Milo stepped off without speaking, eyes scanning the fence, the porch, the barn. Nothing, no soft shape, no long neck casting a shadow. He jogged toward the back pasture. Then he saw the tableau, still, impossible and real. Lorenzo lay near the edge of the field, body tucked against the earth like he'd melted into it. His breathing was slow, like an old clock winding down, eyes half-lidded, calm. The grandfather knelt beside him, dust on his knees. He waited, he said softly. He waited until he knew you were ready. Milo didn't cry, not right away. He sat beside his friend and pulled the picture from the halter strap, smoothed it out, placed it gently beside Lorenzo's face. Then he began to sing. It wasn't the loudest sound, maybe not even the clearest, but it carried for the trees, the birds, the goats, the sky. A lullaby he'd hummed before he had words. One his mother used to sing when shadows stretched too long. He sang until the stars blinked softly into place. Lorenzo passed just before midnight. The breath left him like a sigh stretched across time. Milo stayed curled beside him until morning. In the hush, between night and daylight, Milo whispered one last thing against the hush of fur: "Thank you." The winter passed slowly, the way old stories do, quiet at the edges, soft through the middle. Milo didn't stop visiting the pasture. Every morning before breakfast, he stood by the fence where Lorenzo used to wait, letting the wind press against his cheek, breathing deep. Sometimes he brought little offerings: smooth stones, snapped twigs from the birch tree, an old glove he'd outgrown. He left them gently near the altar, where the earth still bore the shape of where Lorenzo had curled that last night. The scarf they'd used to share was draped over the fence post, faded now, fluttering when the breeze remembered to pass that way. In early April, Milo planted sunflowers along the fence line, not because anyone asked him to, but because he felt it might matter. He pressed each seed into the ground with care, whispering as he worked. "Grow tall," he told them. He liked things that were tall. The sun warmed the soil, rain came, and inch by inch the green tips rose. By summer, they stood taller than him. Milo leaned against their stems sometimes, arms folded behind his head, eyes closed. They made a golden wall behind him, and when the wind rushed down from the hills, it sounded like hooves brushing old grass. The grandparents said little of it, but the scarf stayed on the post, catching light sometimes like it remembered laughter. Milo spoke more these days, but not all the time. He liked the hush between things. He liked to hum when walking from the barn. He liked sharing his lunch with a visiting goat that never learned its manners, and every so often he'd speak to the wind, out in the yard after supper, before bedtime, in the lonely blue hour when the earth felt stretched between dreaming and waking. "Did you hear what I said today?" he might ask, casting the words toward the treetops. The wind rarely answered clearly, but once it spun a spiral of leaves right at his feet and tugged a dandelion puff straight upward like a wish being remembered. And Milo nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I knew you were listening." Children in the town still talked about him, about the boy who'd never spoken and the llama who'd never needed him to. They came sometimes, standing at the far edge of the fence, staring at the wild sunflowers. One little girl left a crayon, drawing on the gate, a figure tall and fuzzy, a smaller figure with a star sweater. The words "best friends" scrawled in orange over the top. Milo took the drawing and tucked it under his mattress. On clear nights when the moon moved slow and curious above the valley, Milo sometimes walked down to the riverbank, the place where he'd been found. The log was still there, softer now, a bit mossy. He'd sit with his knees tucked in, humming to the water sometimes. When he stood to go, he noticed something strange in the dirt: small stones balanced in circles, sticks just slightly angled toward the trees. He never built them. He never saw anyone who did, but they were always there. He didn't say anything about them, not to the grandparents, not to the kids at school. just smiled in that quiet way he'd learned. And sometimes, when he lay in bed and the wind picked up just enough to rattle the window gently, Milo would sit up and whisper, "You still here?" And every once in a while, the scarf on the post fluttered without wind, just a little, just enough. One night, late summer, a storm rolled in from over the ridge. Lightning lit the sky in purple veins, and thunder carried the breath of old things. Instead of being scared, Milo climbed out of bed, pulled on his boots, and made his way to the yard. He stood there, soaked through, watching the sky catch its breath, and just as the rain paused, he said, "I still remember." A hush followed, then dash soft, so very soft a sound, not a word, not even a voice, a low, groaning noise, gentle, familiar, the kind of sound that lives in wood smoke, in warm wool. In memory, it might have been the wind, or it might have been more. Milo ran his fingertips across the post, rain slick beneath his hand, but warm somehow. And when he went back inside and climbed beneath his quilt, he didn't fall asleep right away. Sometimes stories don't end, they just fold into silence and wait.